everybody. Welcome back to the Alli from Corporate podcast. You know, I got Rico here with me. Today, we're talking about a hot topic. I'm not sure what it is yet, but Rico tells me it's sizzling tea. Um, Again, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, thank you. If you're tuning in and watching on YouTube, even better, because you can see our smiling faces. If you are interested in career, anything corporate, climbing that ladder, you are in the right place. That is what this podcast is all about. So, Rico, what are we talking about today?
Today I got a super interesting topic to ask you some questions, and I am going to see if this person did a savage business move or if it's going to end in a cluster bomb that's going to explode in their faces like you wouldn't believe. You ready?
Oh, yeah, give it to me straight.
Okay, Google's CEO Sundar Pichai led or whatever, that CEO of Google. They laid off their whole Python team. And guess what you use to program AI?
Python?
Python. So they laid
Uh-oh.
that off. They're going to do offshore. Um, yeah. So in the news article, it basically says that he fired his entire team and he's going to move it offshore and see where things are going to go offshore. And you and I hired people offshore, and it never ended really well because of time difference, cultural differences, and then to get the
Communication challenges,
that time difference
misunderstanding with
right.
skill levels. We had a number of challenges. And that's not to say that there aren't people in those countries that would do a great job, but you and I have always tried to save money by hiring freelancers in that area of the world, and we've learned that you get what you pay for. So I'm interested to see where this goes. And also, this is the second podcast I've been in this month where Sundar Pichai's name has come up, and I have not known how to pronounce it. So it's time. I'm going to look it up. Sundar Pichai. There we go. Super interesting. You think he's doing this to save money?
No, Google does not need to save money. Google has an infinite money printing machine, and it is trying to. I think it's weak leadership. I think it's stupidity on their end, and I feel like it is. I think, and I've seen this a lot with CEOs. They're thinking of today's problem. They're thinking about where's it today. They're not thinking big vision 30 years down the road where Google's going to be. They're thinking about, oh no, now we're behind on AI, so let's just keep doing something. And the Google ecosystem is so beautiful with Android and all these other things that they got that come together with Gmail, Google Drive, and all that is so beautiful. But if you have weak leadership, and that's why I sometimes think that these leaders, these CEOs, just like Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase.
Oh,
What?
yeah.
I think he's at Chase, one of these big banks. You showed me that podcast, completely out of touch with reality, completely out of touch with the normal common folks. And I believe if you're in the club of these CEOs, like Google CEOs, Elon Musk CEO, all these big CEOs of big banks, of big corporations, they're so wealthy, they don't know what's going on at the bottom of their company. They just don't. They're so rich, they're so wealthy, they don't know. I bet you if you ask them what a gallon of milk costs at the store, they couldn't tell you.
They probably haven't been to the grocery store for themselves in a long time. So you said something interesting that he's only thinking like a couple months into the future when he should be thinking years or a decade into the future. But playing devil's advocate, it would be very hard to strategize and have a vision for years and years in the future when technology and AI specifically is changing so rapidly right now. So I see the challenge, but I do think he's doing this to save money. And I haven't read the article. I'm going to go read it after this. But I mean,
Let me
what
ask you
other
this.
benefit would that be?
So let me ask you this. If it's an ever fast changing environment, how fast, how agile can your team be if you have cultural variance, time zone variance, and all these other things that come with being abroad? So
Slow. Like huge companies are slow moving elephants through a forest, and startups are like little mice that just scurry through the forest and they can get through quicker because they don't have as much mass and they can pivot on a dime and they can go different directions with the blow of the wind. So yeah, Google, I mean, this will be an interesting move that they're making, and I'm interested to see like what happens. Because remember when Elon Musk took over Twitter or X and he laid off a ton of people, and then suddenly there was testing code in like the production environment, and people were like, "What is this? You guys laid off some pretty important people, obviously." So it doesn't always go well.
yeah, but see, the thing is, Elon Musk laid off people because he thought it was overstaffed, and he didn't lay off the whole future of the business. So if he would have laid off everybody from coding, and he only kept on um, janitors and vice presidents, and everybody else was cut, where are you going to be in the future? What's your future going to look like at the company? So these were core people, and now you had these people are highly skilled, or they wouldn't be at Google, right? And now there's no more non-competes, right? And now, so what do? They go to OpenAI, they go to Microsoft, they go to all these other places that will welcome them with open arms, being like, "Oh, you worked on the Google stuff? Come over here." And I read somewhere in it that they said, "Oh, they can find something else in the Google organization or whatnot, and try to absorb them like that." But if I was a coder like that, I'd be like, "Nah, they just screwed me over big time. Let me just bounce out of here and go to another place where I'm actually appreciated." You go to OpenAI where you're at the forefront of it, or you go to another company that is a startup that you're actually going to be making change.
And the
And
non-compete thing is super crazy that they finally got rid of that. I hated non-competes because, and the companies had non-competes for two reasons, I believe. One is so that they wouldn't spend their time, money, and resources and energy training you, and then you go and leave and work at their competitor, and their competitor got a trained employee for free. And the second reason is because people who work for these companies know the inner workings of the algorithm, the software, the hardware, the design, the patents, the intellectual property, the vision and strategy of the company, the finances of the company. And so if you go to your competitor, sometimes the competitor can talk you into divulging secrets. Remember that guy I met with recently who used to work for that one company I worked for? And he said that the startup he was working for said, "We know you just came from our competitor. What's their, what are their patents? What motors do they use? What vendor did they use?" And he told me, he's like, "I definitely didn't feel comfortable saying that, telling them any information about what motors we used at the old company, what vendors, and what specs we used." And the leadership team literally took him aside and told him, "If you don't give us this information, you don't have a future here." That's crazy.
but now we can legally say it.
Well, now he's job searching.
But you know, yeah, it's crazy. But see, when you let your core team go, it's like at one of your old companies, if they let every manufacturing engineer go and they just keep executives and everything else, but there's no more manufacturing engineers, how's the product going to get done? How is there going to be innovation? And then they're like, "Oh, we're going to outsource everything to
But I don't think that's what happened. Let me
look
see.
it up."
Let me look up the article because you're saying he let go of that they only have janitors and CEOs left. I highly doubt
Yep.
that. Um, so let's see. So this is from Business Today.
Yep.
Google layoffs. Sundar led company allegedly fires entire Python team. So, oh, they're building a new team in Munich.
Yeah. Yep. So they're
Interesting.
outsourcing. They're outsourcing. Yep.
Okay, so Google plans to hire cheaper labor outside the US to reduce costs for the company.
Yep.
Wow,
So
there's a guy who had a 20-year career at Google and he just got laid off. Okay, I definitely need to read this article. That's crazy. I'm hearing from so many people that they're getting laid off, their husbands are getting laid off, their kids are getting laid off. Um, and you know what's interesting to me if anybody knows the answer to this, please comment below or like DM me or email me. Do you know if somebody's let go and they get a severance and they're not eligible for unemployment, do they still get counted in the unemployment numbers? Because I
No.
got laid off
They
in August. I did get
count
a
it.
severance. I tried to
No,
file for unemployment and they wouldn't give it
no,
to me.
nope. You're not counted. You are not counted. Unemployment is that's how they skew the numbers. That's how
Really?
that you need to be filed, accounted for to make sure that everything works out. And if you're not in that parameter metrics, you're not counted for.
Wow. So all these companies are laying people off, giving them severance.
Yeah.
And then I think I saw somewhere that yeah, the CEO of JP Morgan just said that unemployment's only 4%, which is like as low as it ever is.
I was
But I
trying to
don't
look
think I
it
was
up.
counted. I don't think I'm being counted as the unemployed. But
Yeah.
technically right now I'm unemployed. I don't think I'm part of the numbers. And all those people that like got laid off with me last year, I don't think they're counted either.
Nope. And that's how they skew the numbers, and that's how they can come out and scream, the economy's doing so great. And we've added so many jobs. Or there's so many job listings active. That's like saying that if you move to West Palm Beach, one of the most expensive areas, and there's 50 houses for sale, and you just take that into consideration, you just take that spot, that small island, and say, oh, and apply it to the whole nation, and there's like, oh, the average house price is only $50 million per house, but you just took a small bite of the whole state and applied it to it, right? And so that's what they're doing. They're taking a small amount of data and saying, oh, the great picture's big. But when you look
Wow.
into it, it's really not.
That's shady. I don't like it.
But that's how statistics work. That's really how statistics work, right?
That's how bias works, and you're not supposed to do statistics like that. But
But how
yeah,
else would you count it?
everybody's saying, "Oh, the economy is doing great right now. Unemployment's really low." And they're saying the labor force participation is really high, meaning the amount of people who are able to work right now, the majority are working, like a high number, like people between, I don't know, 16 and 70, but I don't know. It's crazy times we're in.
Yeah, it is absolutely crazy. And there's so many people that are heard about it. And now we're looking at these big tech companies that are like, oh, we'll outsource. I think COVID was a blessing and was a curse because it told companies, oh, you don't need to have US employees. But as I figured out myself, I always thought that outsourcing was the greatest thing on earth. Like you go to a cheaper place and you get labor that are highly skilled from another place. But then comes to find out time changes, cultural differences, um, and your people are fed up. People are really fed up with not having customer support, not having talking to robots, talking to these AI bots that are, if you have an issue of like, hey, just chat with me, 24/7, and then it's like, oh, you need an agent for this. Every other question's like, oh, you need an agent for this.
You know what? This is reminding me when you talked with Bluehost this week, and you probably have spent 2 or 3 hours on customer support phone calls with
Yeah.
Bluehost recently on multiple phone calls. And I could just tell by the way they were helping you and not helping you, that they had outsourced their customer
Yeah.
service team. And
Yeah.
it was very clear they didn't know their product. They didn't know how to best serve their customer base. And it was
Nope.
just so clear there was a huge gap there. Remember how frustrating that was?
Yeah, and they didn't put me on mute, and I hear them talk in a different language. So I know they're not, even though they get names, and I've actually called somebody from VRBO or something, and then they're like, "Oh, we're located all over." And it's like, "Oh, it seems like you have an accent from the Philippines." And then they're like, "Yeah, that's where I'm located." But we're a global team. That's what they say. They can't give you the location, but we're a global team. And I feel like customers aren't, like companies should focus more on the customer than on their shareholders. Because if they focus more on the core customers, they will make their shareholders happy with giving a better value. But the company's so worried about their quarterly earnings and making and satisfying their
So they're
shareholders.
taking shortcuts and
Yeah.
cutting corners. And I can tell. And
So
I want to be clear, like, we're not saying there's anything wrong with diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of geological origin. I'm all for a global team. But if you're going to have people spread all over the world, all over the country that are going to be providing for your customer, you better be so aligned, even more so than when we were all in the same office together. You need even better communication. And I I'm going to be watching like what happens with this Google team because yeah, now they're dispersed in the job market and they are top candidates that are going to be hired.
Yep.
And who knows if Google's team is going to suffer if they're going to be able to maintain company culture across international lines and still be able to serve their customers.
You said something interesting. I'm all for having world, teams that are around the world, like, oh, you can do it. But the time zone is a huge barrier. So if you're not in the right time zone, communication just gets 10x harder. And I'm working with a global team. I'm, my Airbnb manager is globally located. And it's
Yep.
really hard because I know that there's a time zone that he's in where he's not that active because there's change in, where he goes home and somebody else comes because it's 24/7.
Yep.
So there's all that, and it's great, but it's not. It saves you money, but in the long term, um, I think that's gonna hurt companies, and it hurts your bottom line at the end of
It
the
hurts
day.
your brand image too.
Yeah.
Now, I do not like Bluehost. I'd probably buy a domain from GoDaddy next time. Like that sucked what we had to go through. Also, before we end, one more little like metaphor here. Remember when my grandma was in the hospital and you and I used to visit her in the hospital, and you could tell when the nurses had changed their shifts because a new one would come and they would have no idea what happened in the last nurse's shift. And we'd
Yeah.
have to like update them, and they were like, oh, we just have to follow the protocol. We just have to follow the protocol.
Yeah.
I think these teams that like freelance and outsource to, you have SOPs and you have systems and processes that you train them on. But I think in a lot of cases, things slip through the cracks, little details, little nuances, and they crack this facade that reaches the customer, and you can just sniff out bad communication within a company.
Yeah, I think that AI has huge possibilities. True AI, not like the Amazon AI where they said we have 1,000 people in India monitoring the store at all time, and then if you put something back, we'll return it, and when you walk out with it. But true AI, where it's going to be like 24/7 and just really specific for this one task, like monitor the patient's heart rate, and every deviation will be shown and documented, or everything, it will record just everything
Yeah.
at a hospital. So that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Super
The future.
interesting. It's a crazy world we're living in, but thank goodness we have this podcast so we can update people on the happenings in the world of tech and the working world, the workforce. Um, I think this was a great episode. We talked about a lot, but yeah, if you're listening, if you're watching, thanks for tuning in. Um, make sure to give us a good rating if you have been enjoying this podcast. I love getting good ratings. You guys know that if you watch my Instagram, our little Airbnb nightmare recently, but that's neither here nor there. Let's wrap this up. This was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you for joining, as always, sweetheart.
And I'll see you in the next one.
See you guys. Bye.